Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Beis will begin Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, 2 dots, 6 lines from the bottom. It's mutter to be shoyal a neder, to annul a neder on Shabbos if it's tzorech Shabbos. Is that only in a case where he didn't have time to do it before Shabbos, meaning he was unable to do it before Shabbos because of an oinus. For instance, like the Ran said, that there was no chacham to be matred, he was traveling, he just came to town. Is that when it's mutter? Or perhaps even in a case where he could have done it beforehand, it's still mutter. Tashma, let's bring a right from the following. They became involved in the case of Rav Zutra Brei Rav Zera V'Shorlei Nidra, and they were mater his neder of Alfagav D'Havalei Pnai, and even though it could have been done before Shabbos, so you see that it's mutter even if it could have been done before Shabbos. Shepalkus Hamor B'Tafiyach, so the Mishnah said there was a mice Bimei Avishol B'T Sadik, Bimei Avishol Ben Botnis, Shepalkago Hamor B'Tafiyach, that they closed up the window. They closed it with a kli cheres. There was an opening, and they closed it up with the kli cheres. And they palkaku esamor b'tafiyah koshos megida begemi, and they tied a kli cheres with a reed, with a gemi, with a reed. And because they want to know later, im yesh begigas peiseach tavach imloy, they want to know if the kli cheres had a pesach, an opening of a tavach al tavach. So what's the case over here? What was involved? We bring this in, the Mishnah says, to learn out from this case, to learn out for the tzarech mitzvah that you can close up, stop something up, you can close it up, you can measure and make a kesher she'eno kayoma, if it's not a permanent knot, live on Shabbos if it's a tzarech mitzvah. So what was the ma'aseh? There was an alley between 2 houses. And there was a cracked kli cheres that was over the alley. And they closed the openings with the kli cheres, and they tied the kli cheres with a gemi. To know if there was a crack, was a pesach tavach or not. So this is the mice over here. They had 2 houses. There was an alleyway between them. Now there's a mess on this alleyway. There was a mess over here. The houses had windows. It had a window. So the mess, if it died and there was an oil, there was a covering on it. If there was a covering between the 2 houses, there was an oil, the tumah would be transferred along to the sides, and since there was a continuous oil, the tumah would have gone through the opening, through the window, into the house. And the contents, the interior of the house would have been tumah. So in this case, there was a mess on the alleyway. There was a kli cheres that was an oil that was covering it, and there was a window that someone would have gone in. So immediately before the mess died, they closed up the window. So that's the first case that it says over here, that they were they closed the window with a kli cheres. They closed the window, so not to allow the tumah in. So they wanted to protect the contents of the house and not to let the tumah in. So now, they didn't want to leave it that way. They wanted to see if they could now open the window. Now, they could open the window if there was a tefach al tefach opening in this roof, in this oil. If there would be, the tumah would not be transferred all along. The tumah would go through, so to speak, through the opening. It would not transfer along and into the house. So in order to determine that, they koshos megida begemi, they tied a kli cheres with a gemi, with a reed. So the first thing they did was they closed the window. They did that by putting a kli cheres and with the back of it facing outside, the opening inside, the outside, the back of it is not makabel tuma. That's a chatzitza. It blocks the tuma from coming in. Now they want to determine, is this really an oil over here? So they kashos megida begemi. They tied the kli cheres with a gemi, and they lowered it in between, in the opening of this oil over here, to see if it was a tefach. And they lowered it through into the opening, into the crack in the barrel, to see if it was an opening of a tefach. If it was an opening of a tefach, someone would go up and not to the side, and then they can open the window. If the opening was less than a tefach, then they could not, because then it would be considered an oil. The oil would still be intact, and the tumah would pass through into the window. They tied it with a gemi because they can only tie it with a kasher she'ena shel kayam, not a permanent knot. A gemi is something that would dry up and would shrivel up, so the knot would not be permanent. And also, it's something that they would feed to an animal, so it's not a permanent knot. So they made a kasher she'ena kayama. So from here, you learn out the paikikim. You can close up the window. Your kaishrim. You can tie the kli cheres, the makida, with a gemi. You can kaishrim a kesher kayama, and you can measure to see if the opening is a tefach. So this is how you learn out these things from this mice over here. Ula ikla be reish galusa. Ula went to the reish galusa. Chazil the Rav Baruch Huna the Yosef be'avna the Mai v'ka mashachlei. He saw them and he encountered him that he was sitting in a bathtub and he was measuring it. Amar Alei said to him, Eimer darum Amar Rabbanan medida the mitzvah, the lav the mitzvah mi Amar. The Rabbanan said you're allowed to do a measuring of a mitzvah. Now this is not a mitzvah. Bathtub is not a kosher mikveh, and you're measuring it. A measuring that's not for the purpose of a mitzvah is that mutar on Shabbos. Tais is medayik from here over here that medida the mitzvah, it only has to be measuring that has to be a mitzvah. The paikikim, we said the place of paikim, it doesn't have to be for a mitzvah. You can close up a window. The paikikim, even though the Mishnah says we had this one maisa, and we learn out from here that your paikikim and kaishim mamaydim, but the medida dafka has to be a mitzvah. The kshir has to be a mitzvah. The paikikim doesn't. But Uncle upon him, he said, how could you measure this? He said that over here, Amar Le Misasik Ba'almana, I'm not really measuring it for any purpose. It's not a tircha, it's not an over to the hole. I'm just preoccupied. His mind was always active. He was always active, and he was sitting passively in the tub, so he was measuring and seeing what the measurement would be. It was just a mental exercise, but it wasn't really for the purpose of whole, of any personal purpose. It's not for any personal use. So therefore, it was just his mental exercise. It was Misasik Balma, and it was Moter. Hadrulach Misha Hechshe V'Slich Lem Masechet Shabbos. Hadrulach Misha Hechshe V'Slich Lem Masechet Shabbos. Hadrulach Misha Hechshe V'Slich Lem Masechet Shabbos. Baruch Hashem. As Hashem, we'll start the next Masechta. As Hashem Yisbarach, Maseches Erevin.